So one of the things I recommend is get an emotions list. On my website, I have in my blog session, I have a list of emotions, but you can Google emotions list. It's going to come up with, you probably get thousands of hits for different emotions. Print it off. If something is going on for me and I'm thinking, okay, what am I feeling? But I'm just new to figuring it out. I might come up with maybe one or two, probably really basic ones. If I look at a list of a bunch of different emotions, they will jump off the page, the ones that I'm feeling.
Welcome to Imperfect Momming. Our children are constantly looking to us for examples. The term role model doesn't quite cut it here. We are shaping their worldview with every move we make. You see, it's not in the lectures we give or moments where we're actively attempting to teach them. It's in the micro movements we make, the unconscious ways in which we navigate life. We are constantly teaching our children how to show up for themselves, their friends, their future partners, and even their future children. So what can we do to ensure we are raising thoughtful, compassionate, self-aware human beings? We have to become them ourselves. No one is perfect, but we can all still be better, and it starts with self-healing. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Imperfect Momming. I am your host, Coach Alicia Lyons, and we have a very special guest today, Sabrina Trobak. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I am in northern British Columbia, Canada. I have two kids that are now adults, two boys that are in their 20s now. I was a school teacher for about 20 years, learning assistant teacher mainly, but basically taught in all three divisions, was a school counselor, vice principal, kind of, made my way through the whole system. Towards the end of my teaching, I was a school counselor, went to a workshop on suicide that was presented through the idea of a person's core belief feeling not good enough. At the end of the 3-day workshop, I just thought, this is what I need to do. So I went back and forth with a presenter whose name was Tony Martins for about a year, and he agreed to take me on and teach me his model of therapy. So I quit teaching and started my own private practice back in 2010, where we're really looking at things from that perspective of that core belief, feeling not good enough, not important, not valued. Within 6 months of starting my practice, I have had a waiting list, and I hate having to tell people, sorry, there's nothing I can do. So I decided to write a book called Not Good Enough, Understanding Your Core Belief and Anxiety. So to be able to offer a resource for people who can't access counseling for whatever reason. That kind of sums me up.
Yeah, and that's a lot. And I'm very familiar with that not good enough belief, as I hadn't necessarily thought about it this way, but I think that it is probably the biggest belief that is connected to everything, to all of the problems in our life. Your specialty is like the ultimate, long-term solution to a potentially short-term problem. But it really does affect us in every area of our life. So I understand. As soon as you said it, I was like, ooh, I want to know more. Yes. Well, so thank you for what you're doing in the world. I'll start by saying that. As I'm sure every mom is listening, and her ears might have perked up, thinking, okay, what are the signs and what are the symptoms so that I can see it in my child so that I can be proactive?
Right. So, I think before even really looking at it in your child, you've got to look at it within yourself. You pass your core belief on to your children. So if your core belief is not good enough, you are going to pass that on to your kids. So the key thing is really doing work on yourself, figuring out, how does that core belief kind of look for me? And then what do I need to do to challenge and change that core belief to feel more and more like I am good enough, important, and valued? So often what it looks like, especially for kind of moms, is higher anxiety. We've got these kids that are now our responsibility. It's going to make us feel a bit more insecure. Anxiety is already there if that core belief is not good enough. So if my core belief is not good enough, I'm not going to believe in myself as much that I can handle things. I'm going to have more anxiety. Anxiety is not believing in yourself you can handle something. A lot of people talk about anxiety as, the trigger. I have anxiety of heights. Well, if it was about heights, every single person on the face of the earth would have anxiety of heights, and not everyone does. It's not about the trigger. It's about my belief in my ability to handle the trigger. Mm-hmm. And so if I believe I can handle it, I'm not going to have anxiety. If I believe I can't handle it, I'm going to have more anxiety. So when it comes to parenting, there's definitely more parenting books coming out and more self-help books and all those kind of things. But we all are pretty just kind of dropped into it and said, good luck, hope it goes great, right? And so to have more self-doubt and more insecurity about what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing? Makes that core belief even more significant in our parenting for sure. So we really need to be aware of what is that looking like? How much am I kind of maybe micromanaging or solving for my child so my child isn't learning how to figure it out on their own? If we have a parent who's always, jumping in and rescuing and saving the child, the message to the child is, I don't think you can handle this.
Yeah.
And the child's not learning how to handle things on their own. That's how we build confidence, trying things. So every time as a parent, I take away that opportunity by doing for my child, I'm taking away an opportunity for them to build confidence.
Speaking as the parent who does that, or recognized that I was doing that, it is something that is born from love, and not wanting to see them struggle. But literally, my last guest and I were talking about the gift of failure, because they get to fall down and experience like, oh, I can get back up. And I'm blessed with a kid who is stopping me when I'm trying to do it for him.
Good.
And what I know that where it started was he was, when he would have behaviors that I couldn't handle, or I felt like I couldn't handle. And so I wanted to stop those behaviors by stopping the frustration that created those behaviors. Right. Like things like tying your shoes, or, some video game doesn't work, or whatever the case may be. Right. So it's recognizing that you're doing it as the first step.
Absolutely. The very first piece we have to do is have that awareness. If I'm not aware I'm doing it, nothing's going to change. So how do you become more aware? It's stopping and really just slowing down a little bit and thinking about your thinking. Why am I doing this? Right. And, I agree. We want our kids to be successful, to be happy, to be content. And so we do these things out of love, but we also do them because we don't want to feel our own emotions. Mm-hmm. My child struggling, that creates emotion in me, fear, insecurity, self-doubt, vulnerability. I don't like to feel my emotions. So I need to shut my child down so I'm not feeling my emotions. Mm-hmm. That's about my needs, not about what's best for my child. If my child's toy just broke, they should be feeling emotion around it. That's a natural response to what's happening. So rather than trying to shut our kids' emotions down, trying to just make them feel better, we need to acknowledge, oh, what are you feeling right now? That makes sense, right? I can understand how you would be feeling that. Validate those emotions and let them out. The more they do that, the less they have to carry those emotions with them. And when we see, kids that have a lot of temper tantrums or struggle significantly with behavior, it's often because they're full up with emotion. So now any little thing, can't do my zipper up on my coat, can't tie my shoes, the door doesn't open right away, automatically becomes just too overwhelming because I've already got all this emotion that I'm holding in. I don't have the capacity for anything more. So we need to start talking more about emotions with our kids. But in order to do that, I got to be okay to feel my emotions. Because if I can't feel mine, I'm sure not talking to my kid about emotions.
Yeah.
So it really comes down to, as parents, we really need to work on that within ourselves. Then we can start to be able to provide that opportunity for our kids to talk more about emotions as well.
Which just definitely isn't something that's easy or a light switch, like, okay, now I'm okay with my emotions. Like there's so much programming that goes into um I'm not that emotions aren't okay. We get it from everywhere, but mostly we got it from our parents first. And then we get it around, little comments like, don't be a girl. Why are you crying? You're
Yep.
acting like a baby, all those kinds of things. And it's like, well, emotions, we're acting like a human, not like a
Yeah.
baby. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
and that's been going on, we're bombarded in it, but it's been going on for centuries, right? Emotions are just not really tolerated because if you feel emotions, that create emotions in me. I don't want to feel my emotions. So we have to kind of go against the grain of what has been taught and what is socially acceptable for hundreds of years. That's not an easy task to do for sure. So it can be really challenging to figure out how do I even start doing this? How do I start being more okay to feel my emotions? As adults, if we've been pushing down our emotions for decades, now I'm going to start feeling my emotions? Yeah, right. So one of the things I recommend is get an emotions list. On my website, I have in my blog session, I have a list of emotions, but you can Google emotions list. It's going to come up with, you probably get thousands of hits for different emotions. Print it off. If something is going on for me and I'm thinking, okay, what am I feeling? But I'm just new to figuring it out, I might come up with maybe one or two, probably really basic ones. If I look at a list of a bunch of different emotions, they will jump off the page, the ones that I'm feeling. So now I'm getting better at recognizing those emotions. I do that for a good chunk of time, maybe 6, 8 months before I don't really need that list anymore. But we need that list. What I tell my families in counseling is print off the list, put them all over your house, one on your fridge, one in your car, one in the bathroom, one in the living room, put them all over the place. When you or anyone in your family is feeling anything, you pull out the list and say, what are you feeling right now? Let's take a look and go through that. We just start talking about it.
Mhm.
When we first start talking about emotions, it's scary. It's overwhelming. It's harder for me to talk about what I'm feeling than it is for me to talk about what other people are feeling. So if you're trying to talk about emotions with your kids and your kids just says, fine, I don't know. That's the big one. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. That means it's too much for them. We got to slow down a little bit. So then what I do is I start talking about emotions more in the third person. So we're reading a story at bedtime. I might say, "Ooh, what do you think that character's feeling?" It's much safer for me to say what I think a character is feeling than what I'm feeling. Truth of the matter is, what they're telling you is what they would be feeling in that moment if that was them. But
Mm.
it's a bit safer to do it. So, talking about emotions that way in books, on TV shows, you're in the grocery store and you see someone kind of stomping around. Ooh, what do you think they're feeling? Just start talking about it. Make it more natural conversation. Then when they're going to be more comfortable to slowly be able to talk more about what they are feeling.
So we had a little bit of tech issues just now. So if you're watching the video, you probably noticed. If you're just listening, then I just, told on ourselves, but that's okay. I was always taught if you can't hide it, shine a light on it. So, but I was processing what you were saying through, the lens of my 13-year-old son because, he would probably say something along the lines of, "Oh, uh, what are you feeling?" Um, and I know that parents get really frustrated by the "I don't know." I know I've felt that way, but they're still learning. They're
Right.
still learning what emotions are and how to identify them. And, depending on their age, they want to get it right, which I think kind of goes back to this feeling of I'm not good
Yeah.
enough because that it this relationship to failure I think is that's a good question to ask you. What is the root of I'm not good enough?
I think a big part of it is the emotion and suppressing those emotions. We all have lots of experience. We all have trauma. That definitely plays a role in it. But what impacts that more long term is how the trauma is handled.
Mm.
So if we're talking about it, the child's getting opportunity to talk about how they're feeling, just kind of vent all the concerns, and you're just listening. You're not trying to slap a band-aid on it and solve it. They can work through it a lot better. But often when things happen, we just avoid them and don't deal with them because they create emotion. And so then that emotion builds and builds and builds. That experience becomes more and more significant. Not because the experience has changed, but because we just keep holding in more and more emotion. Over time, that emotion just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So, family separates, and it's just like, dad and I are getting divorced. You're going to live 1 week with me, 1 week with you. And it's just kind of left at that. That divorce may have a lot of trauma. But if you talk about how are you feeling, you're checking in on them on a regular basis over a good period of time, asking them what works, what doesn't work. Not that they have control over it, but their opinion is valued. You make a point of making sure they feel heard, then they're going to manage that divorce in a different way. It's still hard, but it can look a lot different for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And back to what you're saying about the I don't know, it is kind of this catchphrase that gives us permission to just not answer. And I agree. I think a lot of the time it is, I don't know 100%. So I'm not going to say, if I say I don't know, I don't have to give an answer and then be wrong. And that all comes back to that core belief. So even asking things like, well, you don't know, but what do you think it might be? Takes the pressure off, giving them options. Do you think you could be feeling sad, lonely, scared, overwhelmed? Now instead of all the emotions, they have to pick for maybe 4 or 5. That makes it a little bit easier for them to kind of narrow down what's going on. So breaking that I don't know down and dealing with the emotion that's feeding that can be really helpful.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there's, we have, I heard a while back that we have this idea that our parents are perfect because they're the ones that are raising us. It's like, or they're God to us for a long time. And so if something that they do doesn't feel right to us, then we kind of ask this question of what's wrong with me? And that is probably also connected to the I'm not good enough, because if I was good enough, my parents would have stayed together.
Right.
So there's, kind
Yeah,
of in jumping in front of that train too
for
can
sure.
really help.
Kids' brains are very egocentric. Me, 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 me. This isn't just about the toys that I want. This is also about not responsibility, but blaming themselves. I've had a child say to me, my parents got divorced because I didn't make my bed. So we really don't know what's going on in their brain. We know absolutely had nothing to do with it, but for the child who carried this for years, thought it was all his fault. And so the more we talk and be open to talk about emotions, the more likely these things are going to come out. And then we're able to talk about them and sort through them and help them find a solution to that where they can see that that really wasn't the issue.
Yeah. And we all ask these disempowering questions. I don't know if it is something that we pick up from other people or if it's just something that's kind of inherent in nature, like you said, very egocentric. Some of us don't grow out of that. Um, but that we ask these disempowering questions, such as, what did I do to make this happen? And that, the child doesn't know any better. But even as we grow up, there are more empowering questions that we can ask, instead of, why is this happening to me? We can ask, what does this make possible? or what can I learn from this, or where can I go from here? And not the why question, but the other WH questions.
Right. One of the things I often talk about with my clients, so if they come in and they've had a fight with their partner or whatever it is, we break it down into steps. What did you do well? What did you not do well? And what are you going to continue to do moving forward? And what are you going to do different? So that self-reflection is important, but it's not about beating yourself up. It's just owning, I engaged. I shouldn't have engaged. I should have just walked away and gave time for things to cool down. Now I understand that. I'm owning it, not just beating myself up with it. Now I have something that I know I can work on next time it happens. I'm going to work on just disengaging sooner rather than later.
More acknowledging emotions.
Exactly. Yes. Those darn emotions.
Those dang emotions, they just, But I think that the thing that people are also afraid about with emotions is that they think that they're going to last forever. I've heard more times than I can count. Like if I start to cry, I will never stop. And in the reality is that emotions actually last about 90 seconds when you're clear of other emotions. But after that 90 seconds, if you have hold on to other stuff, then they do kind of build on top of each other. So this person cuts you off in traffic and that makes you mad. And now you're mad the rest of the day because you have other anger that's still living inside your body.
Right. Every time we hold that emotion in, we're holding it in. So then when something happens today, it's almost never really about today. It's about all the other times in my life I felt that emotion, right? And it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so to start to feel emotions, a lot of people say that it's just too big, it's too overwhelming, there's too much in there. And that makes sense. But the truth of the matter is, we just want to let it out a little bit at a time. So looking at a list where you're just reading through emotions can be really helpful in starting to feel them in a bit more of a safer place. Emotions are like waves. They can get really intense and really big, but if you ride it, eventually it's going to subside. Maybe it's 90 seconds, maybe it's an hour, maybe it's a day, but it will go away. But then you're going to have to do it again. But over time, what we should see is that wave slowly becomes less and less intense. You get more comfortable feeling your emotions, so it's not as scary. And you don't have as many that you're holding in because you're letting them out. So the combination of those two together can make it easier and easier and easier to manage the emotion. It's still not fun to feel some of our emotions, but neither is doing dishes or doing the laundry, but we do it. And we get on the other side, we've got clean dishes, we've got clean laundry, we can keep going. Same thing. I feel my emotions on the other side of it. I'm lighter. I can move forward onto the next piece. So sometimes we have to do things that just aren't really great and wonderful. It's part of life.
I really love that analogy a lot. Is there a piece of advice that you want to share with moms?
I think it is around this. It's being aware of what is your core belief and what are the things that you are doing unconsciously in the vast majority of situations that are creating that core belief in your child as well. Because there are little subtle things that you are likely doing even on a daily basis that's reinforcing that core belief. Lack of patience, um, uh, you know, rescuing, taking over and doing things for other people, playing on your phone rather than listening to your child, quiet dinners where you're not really talking about things. All those things really say, I guess I'm not worth even a conversation. It's not teaching them to have a voice. If I have a voice, I'm going to feel much more confident in myself. People whose core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued, generally don't have a voice. So they're either very quiet, they need to be people pleasers, try to make everyone else happy, sacrifice for everyone else, or they go to the other extreme where they're trying to kind of force or jam their voices down everyone else's throats. So teaching your child to just have a voice, asking them. Two major questions you can ask your children is, what are you thinking? And what are you feeling? Asking those questions gives them a voice. If I say to my child, oh, are you sad? They're going to go, yeah. They may not be. but they think that's what they're supposed to feel. If I say, what are you feeling? I'm going to get a more honest answer of what's going on. They're having to think through, they're having to problem solve, critical think, analyze, self-reflect. Those are all major skills that are going to help them into adulthood. But then they also get to have a voice in that. That's massive. When they're, in a relationship where their partner's asking them to do something they don't really want to do. Kid in school's asking to cheat on a test. All these little experiences where if I don't have a voice, I'm not really going to know how to handle that. If I have a voice, I'm okay to say, no, I'm not comfortable with that. Mm-hmm. But if I'm not taught that, if I don't see my parents having a voice, my parents asking me my opinion, I'm going to struggle with some of those really, significant things, but they happen on a daily basis.
So good. Yeah. We could talk for a lot more longer. Let's talk good English. Is there a book that's been instrumental in your personal development journey?
Well, I'm kind of biased on that one. I would say my book that I wrote, it took me about 7 years to write it. When I never in my life ever thought about writing a book. So I really was starting from nothing. Over the years, I learned how to kind of make it a little bit more useful, a bit more reader effective. I know as a learning assistant teacher, people with anxiety often struggle reading. So how do you write a book about anxiety for people who don't want to read? It becomes a bit of a challenge. So there's a lot of visuals, a lot of charts, a lot of diagrams. It's broken into very small chunks. So you can read 2 paragraphs and go, okay, I'm done for today. So, it really has changed and developed over the years. It's a very hands-on book. So you read a little bit of information and then you apply that information to your own personal experiences. So it helps you gain a better understanding of where is your core belief? How is it developed over the years? What do you do to challenge that core belief? How good are you at being able to feel and recognize emotions? Emotions are a physical response. We have a thought, it creates a chemical reaction that we then feel physically in our body. So it looks at that in the book about what is that those emotions actually feel like in your body. So we get better at being able to recognize and feel those emotions and let them out, rather than just push them back down.
It sounds like a very, very good read that I will have to pick up. Where can our listeners find you?
So I have a website, trobakholistic.org. My book is available on Amazon. There's also links on my website as well. I'm on Facebook and YouTube at Trobak Holistic Counseling. I'm on Instagram at NGE for not good enough, NGE_Trobak. And on TikTok, I'm on NGE_core_belief.
Perfect. And I want to say thank you for being here and for what you're doing in the world, because we are good enough, and changing that core belief will change everything in your life. I 100% believe that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we will have another episode of Imperfect Momming for you all coming next week. And until we meet again, keep healing. Bye, guys. Thank you for tuning in to Imperfect Momming. It's time for us to step up and realize that our power is not in trying to shape our children. Our power lies in shaping ourselves into the people we want our children to model themselves after. Don't just do it for your kids. Do it for yourself. When you become a more self-aware, compassionate, and confident person, you and everyone around you benefit. For more information about me and my work, visit AliciaLyons.com. That's ALYSIALYONS.com. And until we meet again, keep healing.